Hello again to my fellow H.O. slot car racers. This is Mark Natividad over at West Coast Slot Cars in Los Angeles, California, bringing you another video on how to build fast and fun slot cars. I'd like to start by saying Happy New Year to everyone. I hope everybody is doing well and staying safe and being healthy, and that you are racing a lot of slot cars, because I sure am. Okay, so again, today's video is going to be about building a 3.5 ohm armature car, which you'll be able to use on your regular power supply that you have that plugs in the wall that came with your track. So let's get started with the project, and let me go over the parts and the cars and how to build this baby. All right, here we have my version of the 3.5 ohm car, which we call Super Stock. And before we actually tear this down, let me bring in the real Super Stock. Not that that one's fake, but this Super Stock is going to have a different setup, and this Super Stock car is for a commercial power supply. This car specifically is a Tyco wide pan chassis, and it has the level 4 motor magnets and the level 8 traction magnets. So I started this project, and I wanted to do this project just because I've been hearing from a lot of racers and some of the guys in my club who actually been buying these cars off of eBay, and they get them and they have the home power supply, they put them on the track, and they just won't go. So guess what? There's just going to be too much magnetic downforce, specifically in this car, for it to go around. So if you are using AFX power supply, you're only going to have, let's see, it looks like 0.12 amps in that power supply. In the Tyco, you're actually going to have 0.085 amps in that power supply. So you're not going to have enough to move that car around. But boy, if you have a commercial power supply with this car, wow, it's really fast. And you'll find some information on how to build these. This specific one for the commercial power supplies, but today we're going to focus on a regular home version of this car. All right, so what I'll do is I'll break down the car, talk about the parts, talk about the build. I will give you a parts list after we're finished so that you can get the parts that you need to do this project. All right, ready? Here we go. All right, so this specific car is, take that off. This is a Taiko this is a Mattel. This is a Mattel HPX2 chassis, and I like to use that chassis, or option, you can also use the Tyco chassis as well, the Tyco pan chassis, which will work fine. And I basically just bought these cars from somebody who, again, bought them thinking that they would run on their track, and they're super fast, and they just got frustrated and wanted to get rid of them, so I swooped in and grabbed them. So this pretty much came with the level 4 traction magnets, level 4 motor magnets, and it came with the level 10 traction magnets. So definitely that car wasn't moving on their track. So I basically pulled everything off the car, stripped it down, and I kept the chassis, I kept the original guide pin, and I kept the armature, which came in the HPX2. So you'll definitely want that 3.5 ohm armature. If you have an ohm meter, you should just check it just to make sure. And apparently, which I'll have to do a video about this subject, there's cars that were actually made that did not have a 3.5 ohm armature, and those actually have a different band color. So again, that's a different subject. We'll talk about that later. So what you'll need to keep from the HPX2, again, the chassis, I have the original guide pin for the Mattel, and I have the armature, and I also believe I have the brush tubes for the motor brushes and the motor springs. So those are all the stock parts that I kept from the Mattel chassis. All right, adding my own parts, and to make this project work, there's a lot of experimenting that had to go on, but I think, and I'm pretty sure that I seem to have this specific car pretty much dialed in, and it's very smooth, it's very fast, it's a great running car. It's not going to have the same Again, magnetic downforce is not going to hold as well as the level 8 traction magnets, but man, it sure is fast and smooth. All right, so let's see. Let's go over the parts first, and let's talk about the motor electrical system. 3.5 ohm arm, of course. For the motor brushes, I prefer to use the 80% copper motor brushes in here, and I also use the .006 motor brush springs. So those you'll need for your to get good power to the motor. Let's see, for the other side, for the contacts, the pickup shoes, I use the full contact pickup shoe, and I believe that this is either a Viper or a Wizard. And with this specific pickup shoe, I also used the double pickup shoe spring. Now with these pickup shoes, the double pickup shoe spring helps keep them nice and flat. So what happens if you don't have that, you'll get a little bit of a tilt if you use that single spring, the stock one. So the double pickup shoe spring will help keep the shoe nice and flat. And again, you want to adjust those pickup shoes so you get full contact throughout the whole pickup shoe, from the front of the shoe to the back of the shoe. All right, and you should have a setup track and the proper tools that you need to optimize and make your cars run well. There you go, there's all the power supply. Let's see, I am using for magnets, I'm using the Mattel HPX2 magnets, and I'm using the Mattel HPX2 traction magnets as well. I have a Gauss meter, and I did Gauss the magnets. So two things, I'm looking for the strength, and then I want to look for a pair that matches as close as I can. And if you don't have a Gauss meter, then no problem, but if you can use a Gauss meter and get a matching set, then the motor spins a lot more efficiently, and it'll really work well, be very smooth. Let's see, I think I Gaussed these out. I'm pretty sure they were up in the high 400s, even almost 500, and I found a good set, luckily. And sometimes the number is 1 or 2 off, but close enough. And then the traction magnets were definitely higher as well, definitely a lot higher than the Tyco traction magnets. So you want to use the better magnets. It makes a big difference in the car. Let's see, bulkheads. Oh, let's talk about those. Okay, these are the Tyco, sorry. These are the Taiko bulkheads. You know, all these car parts, crazy. These are the Taiko bulkheads, and I specifically did a video on the identification and how to optimize the bulkheads that you're using for race cars. And I prefer to use the check mark on the front bulkhead. There's a little check mark right there on top. I don't know if you can see that. My view screen is very small on this camera, as long as the picture is good. And then for the rear bulkhead, see if I can get that in view for you. I prefer to use the 4 dot on the rear bulkhead. So there it is right there, and I'm not sure if you can see that. There we go, there. So you see those 4 dots back there. All right, so I basically, again, get rid of those Mattel ones. And I believe I'm also using the Tyco pinion gear on this specific car. You could use the Mattel one, but you know, I don't trust it, and my Tyco that I put on here was already broken in, so I didn't have to do all that stuff. All right, so there's pretty much the motor, the magnets, the pinion gear, the pickup shoes, everything, the bulkheads. Let's see, let's talk about the tires. All right, these are the Hardin Creek. It's the front end, the Razor O-ring front end set for the Tyco 440 wide pan chassis, and those come ready to go. You just pretty much pop it in, and once you pop it in, you want to make sure that there's not a lot of play side to side here. The wheels don't move side to side, and also want to make sure that the wheels spin very smoothly. So there you have it. Very nice. Good smooth, less rolling resistance, and this car will run very smooth on your track. Rear setup. Oh, let's talk about that. So here's my rear setup, and let me remove the axle so we can get into this one. So I prefer to use a Tyco rear axle, and I use different hubs, and for this specific axle I also use a spacer. And before I break this down, let me show you why you don't want to use the Mattel hub. All right, so let's bring that in. There's the Mattel hub, and that's the one that came stock on the HPX2. So I'm going to roll it a little bit and you can just see how wobbly that is. Okay, look how wobbly that thing is. So imagine that car is rolling really fast and how bad that is going to wobble down the track. And here's why these don't work well. I mean, they look good if you're not running the cars or racing them, then it's fine for display, but you definitely want to get rid of this axle. And here's the problem with it. Here is the axle, and I basically pulled off the wheels, and I don't know if you can see that, but there are knurls on the ends of these. There's little knurls there, that's better. There's little knurls which are rough and inconsistent, so you can almost never press a wheel on straight if it has knurls on it. So basically these are just designed for safety so that kids don't pop the wheel off and swallow them. You can swallow the whole axle, but you won't be able to swallow one wheel. You know, I don't know how that works, but I've never swallowed a wheel, and I hope nobody does. So there you have it. So there's your stock Mattel HPX2 axle. So on my setup too, let me bring my good axle in here. I pull off the gearbox, so that's out, and I want to use a spacer. So I believe I put in a spacer so that you get good gear mesh with the pinion and the crown, and you don't have a lot of play side to side. So I believe that's going to be a 0.015 or a 0.020 rear axle spacer. Let's see, I use the hubs, rear hubs. These are Hardin Creek. I believe that these are the single flange rear hubs. And he sells these in a set. You can get a set of two for, gosh, I think under $5. Pretty reasonable. And then lastly is the tire. The tire is actually a super tire 0.442 for the Mega G. So making sure that that spacer's in the correct space, giving this correct spot there. Pop that axle in. There we go. And you should have some nice gear mesh there. It looks like a nice clean modern axle. It should be smooth when you roll it, no binding or a lot of movement. There we go. So that makes for a very smooth running slot car. So there you have it. There's my combination Mattel Tyco 3.5 ohm car for home power supplies, or the wall pack power supply. All right, there you go. There's that, and take a good look at it. I prefer to use the you can use the 300ZX body for the wide pan. You can also use the Ferrari, the F40. There's the Porsche Carreras. There's a few that you can use, or you can use the NASCARs, whatever you like. But for me, this is one of the best ones, and I use the Ferrari F40 body as well. All right, pull that aside, and let's put in my narrow chassis version. There is the narrow version. Basically, instead of the HPX2 Mattel chassis, I used a Tyco. And for most of my Tyco race cars, pull this apart, I prefer to use the Malaysia chassis, and you will see there written right there on top, it says Malaysia, and that's going to be a really good chassis to use for your race cars. Pretty much same bare bones inside. Brush springs, brushes, bulkheads are all the same parts that I mentioned. Rear axle, the same parts that I mentioned, exception for the rear tires on the narrow chassis. I used the new super tires, the 200 series 420Rs on here, and again, that's for the narrow chassis. Let's see, independent front end for the narrow chassis as well. That's going to help you keep the corner speeds. That works very well. Let's see, stock guide pin, I believe that is going to be a Tyco. Let's see, the pickup shoes on this one. These are BSRT pickup shoes for Tyco. Now, these springs in specific, I did not have to use the double pickup shoe springs. The single one works just fine. There's no tilt in it. So again, that's your option. You can use the doubles, but the singles seem to work fine on this one, and I didn't have to forego the expense. Let's see, magnets are going to be Mattel HPX2 motor and traction magnets, and again a 3.5 ohm armature. All right, so there's the narrow version. There we go. Again, should have a nice, good, smooth running car. And Gosh, these cars are fast. They will really get some good speed down the straightaway. So very excited to build these, and you know, when they really come out well, I just have to share the information with you so that you can build them and have more fun with your slot cars. All right, so let's pull these out of the way, and that's the build. And let's do the part sheet here very quickly. All right, see if I can get this into good focus for you. And I'll go over each one. Here, this is the Mattel, starting with the top, the Mattel HPX2 or Tyco 440 X2 wide pan chassis, the .006 brush springs, the 80% copper motor brushes, the .10 double shoe springs, the full contact pickup shoes, the Mattel HPX2 motor and traction magnets, Hardin Creek Razor O-ring front end set for Tyco and 440 wide pan chassis, Hardin Creek, the single flange rear hubs, the super tires are the Mega G .442, and again that's for the AFX track system. And other side note is that that's for the wide pan chassis. And here's the optional things: the .015 or .020 rear axle spacer, the Wizard Pro guide pin for the Tyco 440 X2. You can add those if you like. Again, optional. I think those are about $2. Independent front end. I don't know where those came from, but I know that all the distributors have them. Wizard, Viper, Hardin Creek, Scale Auto, they all have them. And of course, last but not least, the super tires, and this was for my Narrow chassis, is the 200 series 420Rs for the Tyco Narrow. All right, so there you have it. There's the parts list. Hopefully you got that. You have to take notes. There we go. Let's move down there a little bit. Take a screenshot if you have to, or whatever you need to do. It's like those end credits that go up. There you go. All right, guys. So there is the build. There's the project. Gosh, give it a shot. I'd like to see, and I like to hear from you and see how the project goes for you. And please share your comments. And while I'm on that subject, thank you all for your subscriptions. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking. And thank you for sharing your comments. And it helps me and it helps us as a community to grow the hobby. Thank you to all the manufacturers and the people who spend endless hours developing and coming up with new and good products so that we can have fun with our slot cars. It's definitely a hobby worth sharing. Gosh, let's see. I just don't want to leave anything out, and that's it. Please subscribe, please like, and share comments, and gosh, build it. Go and build it, and come back and tell me how it went. I'm dying to hear it. All right. Again, this is Mark Natividad over at West Coast Slot Cars in Los Angeles with another performance video for you, some projects for you. Have fun with your slot cars. Be well, stay healthy, God bless. And until the next video, this is Mark Natividad from West Coast Slot Cars in Los Angeles, California, signing out and saying goodbye for now.